Please welcome, and the stage is yours.
Nice to meet you. Before we get into the discussion and even to the introductions, because we are just coming off of a discussion about an animal, a unicorn. All of us know about unicorns. Guys, if big data was an animal, which animal would it be?
So I think it could be a unicorn because everyone talks about it. No one has seen it. And everyone thinks it's a magic animal that will solve everyone's problems. So, but I think
I disagree. I think it's a cockroach, right? So if you're building a big data company, it takes so long time. So you actually need to go through all the tough times, right? It's not that easy to do, right? So I think cockroach is a better definition of that.
Okay. So let's we'll anchor between the unicorn and the cockroach. Going back to the introductions, my name is Ankit. I am a technical director at Branch. Branch helps mobile app developers build seamless user experiences and drive better ROI for their campaigns and for their users. I'll be moderating the panel and discussing about big data with my friends here. If you can just give a quick introduction of what you do on a daily basis.
So I'm Kirill. I represent ADA. It's an integrated digital marketing agency, which is a part of Axiata Group. So we actually work with big data a lot. So we have, first of all, telco data, which is owned by our sister company, XL Axiata in Indonesia, but also all the other 7 opcos around the region. And then we also have our own data management platform where we use data which we obtain from the advertisement exchange platforms, and then we use it to drive business insights and drive business results for our clients. So we operate in 9 markets, and here in Indonesia is one of our biggest markets.
Hi guys, my name is Ilya. So actually, I'm the CEO of a company called PouchNATION. So if you see the badges, this is us. I come from a very different, world. So Kirill is everything related to online. We as PouchNATION, we do everything related to offline. So PouchNATION, it's an event technology company. We focus on large-scale events. And in particular, our tagline is to digitize live experiences. So we approach big data is very important for us, but from a very different angle. We want to collect data from events that are very offline, very traditional, where nothing much is happening, and we want to digitize that and provide a lot of value to our clients who are both event organizers and brands. So we operate across 6 countries in Southeast Asia. We have physical offices running events every day, everything from 10,000 people to up to 150,000 people. So, and our core is that we don't only collect user data on terms of demographics, but we collect a lot of payment data since we have a IoT element in our technology, and we'll touch on that later on.
That's amazing. So we will get to touch on online data and offline data and how that works. But before we move further into that discussion, there's a lot of myth around what big data actually is, right? Like this has been a term which has been floating around for years. A lot of people know it. Some people don't. Nobody knows how big is big data and how big or how small data sets cannot be called big data. So what is big data according to you? And what it means to you in your business?
Maybe I jump in first, right? So I started my career in working in telcos, right? So I think back more than 10 years ago, we were working in telcos and analyzing a huge amount of data, and nobody ever called it big data, and it was less sexy. Now everybody's like, wow, big data, next unicorn, amazing, let's create something out of it. In reality, data has been there for a long time. Of course, the way of collecting data was slightly different, right? Now you can collect data using IoT devices offline, so it's not only, obviously you have a lot of mobile penetration and apps, but data has been there, methodologies has been there for many, many years, right? I used to do, customer lifecycle analysis, 10 years ago, and in churn prediction models when I was in telco. So for me, I think big data is nothing particularly new. It's just a way how it has evolved and how do nowadays it's easier to collect this data, right? Back in the days, only two sectors were relevant for that, were banks and telcos. Now you have big data everywhere, right? You have logistics devices collecting data and so on and so forth. So I think it's just more interesting, but some of the methodologies are still the same, right? And so we just need to understand that there is some history to that.
I think, yeah, we also agree that big data is a buzzword. And even I remember 5 years ago in similar panels, they were like, oh, big data is coming. It will change the way we work. It will change everything. And then, 5 years later, yes, there is much more data. And actually, I read somewhere that in the last 2.5 years, over 90% of all the global information has been created. That mainly is driven by images, videos. Even, the previous panel, I saw the panelists, while talking, they have taken a couple of pictures, right? So they generated data. And this amount of data is getting more and more, but is it really big data? Probably not. It's just a lot of data. So in my view, big data becomes big data when it is being properly processed, systemized, and analyzed, and used for a specific purpose. And actually, there are even businesses that are built around this, and this is something that we are actually doing in ADA, coming from a telco background, or our mother company is a telecom actually, has lots of data, vast amount of data on user behavior, on locations, yet probably not as successful as some other companies in monetizing this. So I think this is our mission, to first of all to help our sister companies to monetize it, but then also to work with our clients to see how they can use the data that they collect to drive better business decisions and to reach their customers better. And it actually...
Let me just interrupt there. Ray, we'll need to hold on to that thought, but because I want to come back to that and go a little bit more deeper. But just touching on one more point, as Ilya was saying, that you guys have been working on data for a very long time, right? But obviously the technologies around have been evolving, have been changing. In your opinion, when you look back at what you were doing maybe 10 years ago, like what has sort of remained the same and what has changed when you work with data, in terms of working with data?
Well, just first of all, one secret. Actually, Kirill and I used to work together for the same company before.
And actually, it's a pure coincidence that we're...
Yeah, I had no idea he would be my panelist. Right, so we might have a certain view on that topic. I think, as I said, the way things changed is, first of all, you do collect a lot more, right, nowadays. As I said, every single, we all of us have a mobile phone, we all use apps. There are more sophisticated tools to collect and process that information. I'm sure you guys do that as well, a lot. I think, so that's definitely one. Of course, then there is, we always distinguish between the B2C part and the B2B, right? The B2C one is, this is everything we know about, and like all the unicorns we were talking before, they do collect a lot of data on their customers. But of course, there's a lot of B2B data that people forget about, right? Imagine that every car nowadays has about 100 chips that collect information on the performance of that car, right? So that data is extremely relevant to improve processes and so on and so forth, right? So first, I think key distinction is the way you collect it. The second distinction is, okay, what do you do with it, right? We all talk about AI, predictive analytics and all that, right? So I think nowadays, this is very interesting, right? So I think everybody here, I mean, how many of you guys wanna know about the future? I mean, probably a lot. Raise your hands. Okay, a lot. So, I mean, we all know what was going to happen, right? So I think one of the ways of doing that is, what we call predictive analytics, right? So we can actually look a little bit in the future and predict what it is. And more that is happening. But in order to do that, as I said, that's why I said big data for me is a cockroach. You need to collect years and years of clean data, right? Clean, relevant, with a very clear objective, right? So I think those are the key things that at least I observe.
Yeah, I fully agree with Ilya, and I just want to add another example where data can actually become an asset and even a business. So it's an interesting business model. Maybe not many of you heard of a company named Palantir. Who has heard about this company? Okay, maybe
Few.
3 or 4 people. And actually, this company has a valuation probably bigger than a valuation of few companies or all the unicorns of Indonesia. Some say it's valued of over $40 billion. What this company does is actually analyzes, processes data, and sells it to mainly government agencies. So it's actually a very secretive company even. So you will not find a lot of information on it. So I think what has changed is also that data itself has become a business. So there are many more companies. They don't rely on traditional business model anymore to generate revenues. They might not even make money from their operations, but they make money from the data that they either possess or that they obtain through engagement with their customers or clients. So I think the value of data has increased immensely.
Yeah, I mean, I might just shamelessly, plug in the cliche that data is the new oil. That has been floating around. Excuse me for that. But that point actually, is a good segue back into what you were talking about as to how data has become the business. So, and that is something that you are doing, at ADA with, your CDPs. You mind telling the audience about what that is, how that is, shaped up and that is stitched together?
Yes. So it is a very interesting concept that has actually become very popular in the recent years. So the way customers and companies collect data has also changed. So companies realize that there is much more value in data when it is combined or stitched with second-party data or third-party data. So for example, today many companies, they collect the data in their CRMs, right? So they know their client's name, email, phone number. But they very often don't know what this customer does with their app or in the e-commerce store or online, or how does the customer move around, or where they live, or what are their habits, what is their persona. So CDP is a fairly new concept, which helps companies to collect this data and stitch it, the data from multiple sources in a more systematic approach. A lot of different use cases where the clients would then use it for any kind of loyalty programs, cross-selling, upselling, driving acquisitions in a much better way and understanding the customers better than to make this business.
If you stitch it, can you make fashion clothes out of it?
It is actually sounds very simple, but it is technically quite complex, because imagine you have customer data where you already know an email or maybe a phone number, but you would like to know what kind of digital behavior, what kind of apps the customer is using, what is the location. So there are ways, there are tools how to do this, but it's actually still quite complex and requires certain effort from the client to connect touch points, to start collecting this information like device IDs, the IFS, the MSSDNs, emails, cookies data. How many clients, so how many of you are collecting cookies
Lecture afterwards.
Yeah. How many of you are actually thinking about it? Maybe if you don't, start. Yeah, so that would be my recommendation.
Yep.
Yeah. I think very, very important what Kirill was mentioning. I think there's a few other challenges, and I think I've been talking to a few large companies in Indonesia recently, and they have like a lot of business units, right? There's a lot of conglomerates. So they actually generate a lot of different data from different channels, right? And their current challenge is actually what they call Omni-Channel, right? So you wanna, if you have a company where, with different business units, you wanna make sure that you can track your customers across, right? And that's something that is happening now. A lot of big companies are going through that transformation and trying to make sure that everything feeds to one source, right? In your data warehouse, and everything connects and gives visibility on the different business units. So Omni-Channel is another topic that is very relevant, especially for big companies. But even for smaller companies, you wanna make sure that you have your one login for customer that you can track, right? Very important, right? Even in our business, we want to make sure that we can, the more touch points we have with our customers across their life cycle, the more that data is valuable, the more your company valuation goes up. So if you're building any startups, make sure that you know more about one single individual, right? That's where your value is.
Absolutely, and I think in your case, Ilya, like PouchNATION is a data company more then obviously you enable a lot of events, you enable a lot of those real world use cases today. But I think that the data that then powers the rest of it is insanely valuable. Just to add one more point on that, I was having another data-related discussion somewhere was, there's a lot of transaction which is happening. There's a lot of offline, stuff that is happening, and the companies who are now building use cases to collect that kind of a data are the companies that will be much more valuable in the longer term, right? Because as you know, you can build features. Some feature might be in fashion, or some use case might be very relevant in 2019. It might not be as relevant in 2025, right? Like look at Facebook. Facebook started with a social network, did a lot of those things, but at the end of the day, it has the data which is making it sustain. I think companies that are built to survive, let's say 100 years, will be built who have a really strong foundation on data.
Maybe, yeah, just to add to that point is data is not only digital data. So I think there, we had a brief chat before this panel. An example of from the sports industry. So NBA is a big industry, and one of the teams, Houston Rockets, has actually built a data team to analyze the behavior and the movements of their players on the field, right? So this was purely analog game, yeah, before that. What they've done, they started to track location of the player, where the shots were made, and they started to drive the behavior of the players and the team strategy based on this data, and actually it helped them. So last season, they were the top team in their conference finals, and they only lost to Golden State Warriors. And what they found out is that actually three-pointer is a much better shot, as well as the slam dunk. So they basically stopped doing long distance two-pointers.
Yeah.
They changed their team strategy. They used lots of analytics, very sophisticated hardware and software to track all these movements. All of that has been analog, but they digitized it and then they started using it. So I think there are a lot of applications from other areas where still we have not yet come to to that point how to use this data and how to analyze it. But it's a good example, yeah.
Well, I know what to do my next basketball game, so no more two-pointers. Just to sum up, I think we're running out of time. I think just for everybody in the room, a lot of people talk about big data, a lot of data is being collected in this era. Just always make sure to have very clear your objectives of what you want to do with it, right? And how do you plan to make money out of it, right? A lot of companies are sitting with terabytes of data and they have just no idea what to do with it. And then what's the point, right? So I think we need to take out the buzzwords, right? Like let's just go back to the core. Simplify it, right? It has to be. I've seen startups that say we are AI, data, big data company, and all these buzzwords. But then, what does it all mean, right? So I think it has to be simple. You have to be able to explain it in a one phrase of what does data mean for you and how are you planning to make money. If you cannot say in one sentence that, then for me it's all worthless, right? So I think that's something I would like to conclude with.
That's a really good guidance. Say it in one phrase, otherwise you're out. It will serve well for your VC career down the line. Kirill, do you want any closing thoughts on?
No, that I fully agree. I think you need, when you start collecting data on your customers, on your operations, you always need to have that idea in mind, how you're going to use it, and make sure that also this data is reliable. So we see very often with our clients, they sit on a lot of data, millions of records, and then we start looking into, and all this data is just garbage. So make sure also that if you collect data, it is trustworthy and you can use it in the future.
Cool. I know we are out of time, but maybe just one question from the floor if anybody has. Oh, we have one there.
So we have somebody there for a question.
Hey, how are you guys?
Great.
Hey,
Thanks.
So I'm an early adopter of data science, and I'm really have a major crush on like a big data stuff. So, but I guess like the more deeper the hole that I dig, the more what's it called? The more notion that I had, like the data is biased. Like in terms of like the how you interpret it, like in terms of who interpret the data is biased because right now in the landscape that we're living, that we only have like yes, there's a lot of data on the air, but right now we only capture like 20% data on terms of populations. Like 80% of populations still stay online, still offline. So the major data that's on the cloud right now is majorly represents that this minor this minor populations instead of like the whole. So I just want to know like how does the big companies how's your perspective towards that, and what is your behavior and what's your futures plans on that? So yeah, that's it.
Well, I think two things, right? So, I mean, statistically significant, you don't need to have like a huge sample, right? It has to be diverse, but not huge, right? I know companies that, startups that operate with only 100,000 people per country, and they do all of the conclusions from that sample, right? So sampling, in data science is always there, right? But of course, you have a very valid point that, when we are on the phones, yes, we do collect data and we know that. When you're off your phone, what do you do? We still don't know, right? So there are companies that try to collect that information, right, in a more passive way. So I think, for example, just from my industry, we are doing, RFID for events. So RFID is one tool, one example where you can have a chip, which is a passive chip, and that can be tracked using RFID antennas, and customers might not even know, right? So there are more ways emerging to do that, and I think that's where also the future lies. The future lies in collecting data offline and not online, to a certain degree.
Yes, I fully agree, and you don't have to be online to leave a trace. So there are CCTV cameras, there are a lot of retail solutions.
Yeah, look what is happening in China. Like in China, everybody's, the CCTVs are very powerful, right?
Even if you're not online on Facebook, you physically exist. You move around. This data is being collected. And I think what is very important is not only the data about the consumers or humans. Lots of data will come from the IoT field. Yeah, so there are predictions that around 25 billion IoT devices will be just in a few years' time. They all will generate humongous amount of data, so which can also be used for driving business decisions, depending on what industry you're in.
Cool. Okay. We have our signal to leave the stage now. Thank you, guys. I think there were a couple of other questions that we couldn't get to. We are all here around, so please come tap on our shoulders. You have been a great audience. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. That was really great.
Thank you. Great discussion.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.